So we now move on to the final session of the day, and as the stage is getting set up here, I'm just going to explain what we have coming up. We have Who Wants to Be a Media Leader, the number one game show in media, which is a very cluttered market if you know your game shows in media. A very quick notification that Ali Reid so couldn't make it. She had a pitch on. Naturally, I was disgusted. I said, do you not know what you're doing? This is the number one game show in media. She realised the mistake very early, tried to call me back, but I had blocked her already. She will learn from this mistake. Luckily, someone did see that this was an opportunity, and I'm delighted that very last minute, while queuing up for her lunch, I managed to grab her and say, please, can you step in? Faye Turner, Head of Commercial Strategy and Insight from Hearst, joins the agency team, and she does have agency background, MediaCom, I believe, so no pressure at all there, Faye. But without further ado, I think we are now ready for the teams to join us. So please give them a warm welcome as we welcome to the stage Jem Lloyd-Williams, Danny Donovan, Ross Sargent, Bab Patel, Lisa Walker and Faye Turner. So are we ready? The clicker is not working. Ali, you don't know what you're missing, is all I can say. So here we are. Who wants to be a media leader? Now, there are 3 rounds to Who Wants to Be a Media Leader. Round 1 is Who Said That? So if you know our publication, The Media Leader, you will know we have an array of amazing columnists. We've taken 4 quotes from those columnists. It is up to our teams to look at the quote, and they'll have 4 options to get it right. So clearly we will find out if they do read the number one publication in the media industry. If not, we will taunt them until our throats are sore.
Get ready for that.
So first of all, I'm going to come to team agency. Dame Sharon White certainly comes across as a woman who knows who she is, with the confidence to follow her instincts. I want to know which one of our columnists said that. You may confer. Was it A, Bianca Barrett, B, Jan Goodin, C, Lawrence Green, or D, Omar Oakes? Do we have an answer?
We do.
And who have you gone for?
We're going with B, Jan Gooding.
Anyone else think that's correct? That when I ask that, you can go, yeah, no. Correct. Round of applause there. So this article was about Dame Sharon White, who was appointed chair of John Lewis Partnership a couple of years ago. She's held a variety of roles in civil service. One of the things that Jan refers to in an article, that there was an opportunity to learn from leaders from outside of the industry. So what I wanted to do is kind of lead on from this is to ask each of you, and also open it up to the client team as well, you know, great examples of leadership from the past year, 2 years. We know we've really had to see that. Also, I think, you know, to Jan's point as well about can we learn from leaders from outside of the industry? Should we be bringing more of those in? Do we do that already? And, you know, what type of leader do you admire and what type of leader do you try to be? I'm going to pick on you first, Danny, for that one. So any one of those points in terms of perhaps you want to focus in on?
Okay, yeah, I will do. I think, and she is connected to our industry, and I'm not really sure what kind of team she led, but my greatest example of leadership over the last year or so was Frances Haugen, the now world famous whistleblower from Facebook. And I think, you know, it takes some guts to give up what I have no doubt was a very successful and well-paid, lucrative career in that organisation and come out and do what she did and sit in front of governments around the world and press and whatever and talk about the bad things that were going on. I think I read one quote from her that said, I never planned to be a whistleblower, but there were lives at stake. And that kind of sort of nailed it for me. Yeah. So that, from outside of our industry, but connected clearly, that would be my best example.
Okay. And if I go with perhaps you, Lisa, is there anyone to follow on for that, or is there, you know, perhaps examples of your own leadership? Don't laugh, Lisa. This is a very serious quiz show.
Yeah, I would say that, I hear more and more leaders talk about how leadership is actually it's about your team, it's about nurturing and leading, it's about demonstrating by example, but then ultimately actually running the organisation through the people that you nurture within your team. So I can't say I've got one particular person who did one particular thing, but I think the leadership styles, which are probably, which are very common in our industry, because I think the media industry does tend to be, very diverse. It has very, a really strong representation of women in leadership, and, tends to be very forward-thinking. You see a lot of modern leadership, which is very much based around nurturing talent and people and listening rather than telling. So that's what I try to do.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they would like to add around the point of leadership?
I think President Zelensky should get.
So I was going to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Slava Ukraini.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say on that subject, because it's slightly contentious, but
I think we probably all agree with that.
yeah.
Definitely.
I think when it comes to leadership, I think we're lucky in this day and age, actually, where we now have the resources, the people, the technology, the research to really think about inclusivity. So as leaders, how do we build inclusive teams? How do we create a sense of belonging? And I think everyone's up for it. And I've seen so many different sessions today all talking about inclusivity. It's front and centre. So as leaders, we've got an opportunity to make sure we really build inclusive teams. That's the only thing I'd say.
Do you think is there anyone or a few people perhaps you think that are doing that very well at the moment?
I wouldn't put anyone on the spot. I do it quite well, to be honest with you. My team's in the back somewhere.
I need a buzzer. Can I buzz you?
50-50? It's a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire joke.
No, I wouldn't put anyone on the spot, but there's plenty of leaders in the industry that do it well.
Okay.
Karen Blackett, there we go, as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to move. Faye,
I
would
was
you
just
want to say
going to
something?
add to the inclusivity part, because I think the diversity side of things is really important. But I've worked in some great organisations before also, where every level, every part of the hierarchy, every kind of role within the business understood the vision and how they contributed to that. So it's also about your role will always play a part. The facilities team keep those buildings and operations running. You can't do your jobs without them. You might be the people on the front line bringing in the money or winning the pitches, but you need everyone to be part of that machine and part of that ecosystem and supporting each other. So I think there's a level within the organisations as well that needs to be acknowledged.
Okay. Well, that puts then Team Agency 1-0 up. So over to
What a great
the
quiz.
team.
Thanks very much.
Let's go, team.
Yes.
So, Team Client, your question is, to some industry observers, a privatised Channel 4 with an enforceable public service remit and guaranteed commitment to the UK production, both in-house and indie, can hardly be worse than the current state of affairs. Now, who said this? Was it Nick Manning, Lawrence Green, Stephen Arnold, or Karen Nelson-Field?
Lisa?
I think it's Nick. It's not Karen. I think it'd be Nick Manning.
Okay, we're going with A, Nick Manning.
C, Stephen Arnold.
That's what we had.
Surprise there in the audience as well. There was a lot of people going for Nick Manning as well. So, don't
we
feel
had
too
Stephen
bad.
Arnold.
So this, obviously, this particular piece here is, fairly self-evident what this piece was about. So the Channel 4 privatisation. What's our views on this, Jem?
I think if it's privatised and bought by the right entity, then I think it absolutely could be a really good thing. But that's a massive if. I think Channel 4 has had a rocky few years, if I'm being totally honest. I'm not sure if you genuinely studied its remit, it's fully fulfilling its broadcast remit. You know, and that's not a criticism necessarily; it's an observation. It's had to go hunting for ratings because it's, you know, it has a commercial obligation, etc. That said, I still think it's an amazing institution. I think it produces some of the best programming we've got. It certainly, from an inclusion and diversity perspective, is a country mile ahead of not necessarily the other broadcasters, but many other in the publishing space, and is brilliantly led. If we're talking about leaders, I think Alex is brilliant. So, but yeah, I definitely think it can be, but it's whether by privatising it they abandon its original remit, or whether they actually then, which I hope they would do, is to actually reinforce it and go back to what the very original essence of Channel 4 was all about. I think with privatisation comes perhaps a bit more latitude to be able to commit to some of that kind of even more forward-thinking, progressive content and programming and whatever. I think that money might enable them to do that, but it's a big if.
And if I come over to the client team, I'm just going to. There was a Ray Snoddy piece on the subject as well, another one of our columnists, and he quoted Phil Smith, director of ISBA, who was speaking for advertisers by warning that the sale could reduce competition in the UK ad buying market, as Channel 4 is only one of 3 major TV houses. Any kind of view on that, where that sits for advertisers, good, bad thing, indifferent?
I think it's a tricky one, because I think that position is based on an assumption that Channel 4 would be bought by, dare I say it, Sky or ITV. So I think it comes from a fear that broadcasting will be reduced to 2 media houses. Now, it's impossible to say that will be the outcome. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. So from an advertiser point of view, it's not ideal if you only have, 2, I guess, sellers of commercial TV airtime. And, that could, the government could block that, but they rarely do. But I think there is a fear that if there's consolidation within the TV market.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing on that?
Yeah, of course.
I think I totally agree. But I think if a duopoly did exist and that forced, not necessarily forced, but it promoted the idea of television being sold in a slightly different way and traded in a slightly different way, that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
That would be a good thing. I think everyone benefits from that. But again, it's a big if.
I can see you nodding there, Danny. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chairman is absolutely right. It depends what happens, how strictly they're kept to whatever rules that go around it, and it could be an opportunity. I don't think we'll end up with a duopoly, and I don't believe, therefore, that there'll be a decrease in competition. I think, depending on who buys it, it could actually increase. So, I things I'm not an expert on, and this would be one. I kind of go with my gut on a little bit, and my gut's saying I'm not that bothered.
Back over to client side. Obviously, it would be completely wrong of me to put you on the spot, Bav. So, what do you think? No,
I'm going to decline to comment. Thank you very much.
Ross, from an advertiser perspective.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a slightly different perspective. I think, it's what Channel 4 does in terms of content is some of the most best, wonderful, diverse content in the world. It's, as a gay man, there was programming, 15 years ago, which you just wouldn't have got on a private channel. They wouldn't have done that. They didn't do that. And it's in all spaces. And I think the way it works now, we've got these 2 fantastic government-supported or funded entities which are producing content. And if you look at other countries like South America and Australia and America, the content's shit. It's awful. And it's Love Island-y kind of stuff, which I know is done. But I mean, where we're going to get to is get this point of the stuff that's going to get short, easy attention and easy viewers. And I think having this kind of input is a bit like when they used to fund operas a couple hundred years ago, or it was a big thing, and I really think we need to, as a country, we need to stick to making sure that we are protecting excellent content, because it is the art form of today, and I'm very, very proud of it as a 80% English person.
We haven't. There's a couple of answers that have alluded to the type of organisation that could buy it. Does anyone have any? Want to take a punt in terms of who they think would be the front runner?
So outside of the obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love I'd love an organisation like The Guardian to buy Channel 4, but they wouldn't have the money. So,
As long as it's not Elon Musk.
yes.
He's in the mood.
It's got to be someone who really wants to kind of invest in the diversity and the variety of content, because I think it was to your point, Danny, like, if you take Channel 4 and you try and reshape it into something else with whatever private money might come in, you've got to not move away from the essence of the brand. I think actually Jeremy was talking about that too. It won't be the same brand, and you've got to evolve it and kind of build on the strengths of it, because if we're talking about future of brands today, you can't completely reshape it. Like, it's got to still have the essence of it. So
I do think the government's been a bit. I'm not sure they come out quite clearly enough, certainly to garner public opinion for the sale. On you can only buy it if you're buying Channel 4, you know, and you might commercialise it a bit more, and you might put a bit more money into production, but effectively, it's Channel 4 that you're buying, and it remains Channel 4 for, you know, not ad infinitum necessarily, but for at least a period of time, because it's ours. And if you want to buy it, then those are our terms. I just don't feel the government's in it. Well, I don't know why I'm surprised, but they haven't really come out and said, you know, if you want it, that's fine. But if you want it on these terms, then fine. But I might be wrong, but it's hidden somewhere. It's not in the rhetoric I've heard.
Yeah, I think what makes Channel 4 so special is not just that it represents diversity, but it also has a hunger for and a bravery that sets it apart, and it has pioneered programming. It has changed sometimes the social agenda, or brought to light things that are unspoken, and that takes a leadership and energy and an attitude that you can't regulate for. It has to be within an almost, you know, a fabric of that organisation.
It's kept the UK film industry going. I mean, that's, you know, in the really lean times, that's Channel 4 was the only real British entity that was actually putting money into the UK film industry. I mean, it's much healthier now, but so yeah, its legacy is undeniable.
Does anyone in the audience have a viewpoint they might want to put forward, or a question around the subject for the panel? Yes.
I just wanted to add that it's also not loss making, which I think is really interesting when it comes to selling it off. Sorry, I was just going to add that it also isn't loss making, so it doesn't make a profit because of the way it's set up, but it is an asset in that way to us in the UK. Just as some context.
Yeah.
And it's ours. Just to be clear.
It's one of the few things the government does that doesn't lose money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Track and trace.
No,
That's a very good point.
we're all friends here. It's all welcome. Right. So that means it's 1-0 to Team Agency. No, do you not understand the rules, Agency team? These are your clients. You're not meant to let them win. Here's your chance to go 2-0 up. So, who said this? It's hardly a novel online strategy for an online media company. Offer a free or low-cost tier supported by ads and a premium no ads option supported by subscriptions. If you can't name 20 media owners that do this right now, you should quit your job in media because you aren't paying attention. So my question is, name 20 media owners. Was it A, Karen Nelson-Field, B, Nick Manning, C, Ray Snoddy, D, Omar Oakes?
Well, it's not Omar because it's largely spelt right. Yeah.
It's got business.
yeah, probably the opinion piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we going for?
Steve, we're going with C, Ray Snoddy. Final answer.
Lock that in. It was Omar.
Someone obviously proofread that.
I had a cough in the audience. Definitely. Yeah. Sounds like Omar.
So this piece here, this one was around obviously the heart of this particular column was Netflix announcing the subscriber loss for the first time in a decade. There was a rounder conversation around this that took in, you know, broader streaming, also some of the other social platforms, Spotify, the controversies around Spotify with Joe Rogan, the Jimmy Carr Netflix piece as well. So just picking up though, first of all, if we go to what the heart of this was, the Netflix piece. Has it come as a surprise that this has happened?
Not in the slightest.
No.
Not at all.
And why? Could you elaborate on why you don't think that's...
Well, sorry. Go on, Beth.
God, I was going to say we're in a cost of living crisis. Actually, what can I say about Netflix? We're in a cost of living crisis, and we're already seeing consumers are now starting to tighten their belt, make choices. This was going to happen. They've obviously dabbled with advertising. They've talked like they're warm to it. And I think if they do go down that route, there is an opportunity for advertisers. My friends at Sky Media will get annoyed, but that is a fabulous opportunity. If they open up their platform, have to work on their subscription. But I think there is something there that consumers will happily sit through because we have a legacy of doing that in order to get their great content.
I think also there's a little bit of context here because Netflix are not going through a crisis. You have to remember that they're a platform that have matured as a huge, multi-million-pound business. And also, during the last 18 months, there was a massive big spike in, SVOD subscriptions because there was insatiable appetite for content. So if you compare, and in fact, actually, when you take out the suspension of all Russian accounts, actually, the slowdown in their subscriber numbers is not anywhere near as big. But I think it just shows a maturity in their business. There was a mini spike in 2020-21 that's now just being right-sized. And obviously, and I think the long-term model of being able to choose between ad-free and ad-served content is probably here to stay. And I think most businesses will find a way of, in a way, it's the model that Spotify have always had, where, and I think that's the maturity in probably, certainly in the broadcasting business, it's probably we're going to see.
Yeah, and I think that puts it in the hands of the consumer, though, doesn't it? It gives them the choice, and that's what the consumers will want, because I think kind of taking away the extra sharing of your passwords and your platform with other people is a bit tricky because they've already set an expectation, and any brand going back on an expectation and making that a worse experience is probably never going to be received well. Obviously, it talks about tax on poor people there. But yeah, you've got to obviously give people the choice and make that experience still positive with the brand.
Netflix is also in a unique position in the sense that its global footprint and the consumption of content is unlike any of the other over-the-top platforms. It's available in 138 countries, I think. Apple Plus is available in 9, I think. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it has the ability, I think, quite rightly, to test and learn. I mean, it's already done an ad-funded model in the States, a sort of a brief test last year, and with very mixed results, very mixed kind of like feedback for consumers. I think Lisa's right. The idea that you would have sort of an opt-in and an opt-out, pay or not pay a little bit more or watch ads, that clearly is, I think, got to be on their strategic roadmap, and they'll do it really well because they're an unbelievably well-run company that has all those laboratories that you can use to work out what's going to be the best thing for consumers. Clearly, I know a subscription business and they're ruthless commercial, but consumers are at the heart of their strategy, I think. It would be a shame, I think, if the whole thing became ad-funded or subscription became less of a thing for them, simply because that then puts more of the decision-making on what they make back into a sort of a more commercial, there are more stakeholders in who's deciding what type of content they make. And I don't think you'd have things like Squid Game, having the success it had, even though it was slightly overblown. It wasn't quite as successful as everyone thought it was. But that type of, fantastic content, I think the ability to do that is slightly diluted if your main income base is advertisers.
But that's what they're trying to protect, isn't it? The quality of the content and the ability to create all this great content from lots of different providers across different countries and languages, for example. So I think that's obviously something they've got to be holding on to. And obviously the PR that they get from the fact that their films are for Oscars is obviously incredible, and some great winners there too.
I think the surprise for me was that anyone was surprised, really. Obviously, it kind of caught some Wall Street people by surprise because the share price has crashed. But, we've got two brilliant subscription businesses on the stage, and subscription businesses deal with churn all the time. It's especially every day job, right, to manage that and to fill up the funnel. So I don't think we can be surprised that maybe it's been accelerated by the cost of living crisis, but it was coming. And also, it's a pretty, I'd be churlish to call it clunky, but it's a pretty one-dimensional model, as in we won't have any advertising and there's one price you pay for it, or, there are various prices you pay based on the delivery quality, but it's basically one price you pay. And they are going to move, and Jem's absolutely right, they can test this almost infinitely. They're going to move to a blended model, and they'll probably move to a slightly different level of subscription model in the same way that not everyone buys full fat Sky. So, they'll just move to the next level of it. And I think, and there's clearly a lot of self-interest and vested interest in this, but, some people on the supply side of our business will be distraught at the fact that there might be some more inventory coming into the market in advertising in whatever form it takes in Netflix or on Netflix. I'm a media buyer, so, I'm pretty up for it.
And is Omar in the room?
I actually read that article as well.
I don't know if he's in the room. I just wondered, is Omar here? Put your hand up if you are. He's not here. I was going to get his view. Does anyone else have a viewpoint? Dino, if we could get a mic over there.
Thank you. So I'm quite surprised that the panel hasn't mentioned live sport because, everyone's talking about cost of living crisis and competition and all the rest of it. I mean, I don't think consumers are prepared to pay or see adverts in their dramas and in their films. But live sport, and the reason why you pay £85 for your Sky subscription rather than £10 for your Netflix subscription is because it's funded by advertisers in live sport, which has natural ad breaks. So isn't this just a play for Netflix to get into live sport because they can't afford to otherwise without an ad-funded model? So shouldn't be the likes of Sky be quite concerned that they're probably going to be pitching for the Premier League rights, and that will expand the proposition?
No, to be fair. We've had it with Amazon, we've had it with BT. We are frenemies. They're all out on our platforms. We found a way to coexist. So no, not really, to be honest with you. That might inflate it, maybe 2-3 years down the line, but not at present. We've got to try to find a way of working with these guys.
I think the elephant in the room and the bigger danger here is the brands that are putting content as a value add, and as a loyalty play. So Amazon and Apple in this, who don't need to do this and have incredibly deep pockets and can afford to outbid Sky for some of the rights or whatever, as much as they fancy, if we're honest. But there isn't then the opportunity to use that in a commercial sense. It's just to get people to buy more stuff.
Do you think that will happen or not happen?
What,
that one of those going in, and I know that Amazon obviously got some of it,
I think, I know Sky 5-6 years ago would have said that wouldn't have happened, but I think it was pretty inevitable, and I think it will accelerate, if anything.
Yeah, it's when BT bought the Champions League. We actually walked away from it. Our strategy is all about aggregation. How do we become get into people's homes and aggregate content and actually have all the partners with us? So look, if something comes in, we have to think about it. I'm sure the people are thinking about it, but at the moment, it wouldn't be a concern.
Okay, we're going to move on. We're at 1-0, I believe. Before we go into round two, client team, here's your chance.
Intentionally.
Can we use the 3 special things?
Yeah, we didn't ask the audience in a minute.
Unfortunately, our PowerPoint skills didn't go quite that far. So, if the media doesn't do more to protect the journalists working under their banners, they're sending a message that abuse is just part of their job. Part of the job. Was this A, Ray Snoddy, B, Jan Goodin, C, Bob Wootton, or D, Bianca Barrett?
I'm just guessing. That's really...
Totally guessing.
It's so journalist.
Having read this article, we definitely would like to go with a 50-50.
Computer, take away 2 wrong answers. Computer! No, sorry, it's not working.
You're of the gate, yeah.
You can do it, though.
What do you reckon?
I don't know. Sorry. I think it sounds like Jan.
All right, let's go.
Who are we going with?
B.
We're going with B. Jan again.
Jan Goodin. Let's have a look.
Oh.
Sorry.
So Bianca is a new columnist to the Media Leader. She's a former lifestyle writer and shopping editor of the London Evening Standard. She's now a senior contributor to the Forbes Women and has written for titles including the Sunday Times, Independent, Cosmopolitan. And this piece, obviously you probably tell from the title, she's raising the issue of online abuse, specifically journalists in this case. Where I kind of want to move this question onto, though, is more around the area of brand safety. And obviously there's a lot of conversation around whether social platforms do enough, but I don't necessarily think it should be restricted to that. There are newspapers with the comments within that as well. So leading into that around, whether is enough being done, and also I'd like to look at things in which, instead of just looking perhaps, I know we talk a lot about things when we say it's not, perhaps examples as well where you think things are being done as well, and what others can learn from in that. Danny, do you want me to come to you first?
I can do. Can I just say that I think this is really important, though? Because, we're incredibly lucky, in this country and most of the sort of the developed world to benefit from a free press. And clearly you read the press through your political lens and, you get a version of that truth or whatever. But, we need to protect the truth and the free press as much as possible. So I think this is very important, and anything that undermines that should be very heavily dealt with. On the point of safety, can we start calling it people safety, not brand safety? Because I think the really important point is that bad things go on online or in all media channels, and our focus seems to be a bit more on protecting brands from being up against it and in the wrong place than stopping the thing in the first place. And our first thing is, we for good reason don't want the brands to be up against it, but you've got to stop the problem. And the reality of that is, of course, that none of the media channels that any of this hate or bad actors happen on have invented it. These things existed for thousands of years before any of the social channels or whatever came along. But they've sort of made it easier in the way that, Uber didn't invent getting a cab, but they made it easier. And that comes with consequences, right? And the consequences have to be dealt with by the organisations who are part of the problem. And so I think that's the fundamental thing. It's about people safety, and those platforms or whoever have got to take responsibility.
Okay. People safety, do we agree with that?
Yeah, I guess, the reality is that social platforms are social platforms. They allow the public to have a voice, and the public will behave like the public does. So, I think putting the whole onus on the media platforms is pretty unfair when they're not creating the hate. It's us. And those platforms have so many users publishing so much content that the reality is that they're having to use AI tools because they can't have humans look at everything. And they do have, for certain, YouTube does for certain content have humans looking at, their select content, and God help the people that have to do that all day. So I don't know if there's an easy answer. I think, a lot of brands got involved when they discovered they were actually funding hate, especially on YouTube. And I think YouTube absolutely put lots and lots of measures in place to correct that. And Facebook have done a lot as well. Facebook's slightly different because advertisers aren't actually directly, funding content. So the model's different, and the brands are slightly more removed. And now we've got the same problem with TikTok. I read an article the other day that suggested within 40 minutes of setting up a TikTok account, you'll be served false information. And again, it's an immature platform that's going to have to learn how to regulate as best it can. But now you've got the whole obviously topic of Twitter, which I'm sure you're going to raise, which is now getting pushing us way back to the beginning, where obviously Elon seems to think there's too much moderation and regulation. I think it's a tricky one. I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter because I love reading news on Twitter, but the journalists I follow, when I look at the comments, it's a barrage of abuse. It's shocking. It's shocking what journalists actually put up with, and I'm surprised they are still willing to use the platform, actually, to be honest.
just going to park Elon for 1 second. It's Faye, just picking up on obviously being at Hearst with journalists and the point of the story here. What's your experience at Hearst with this, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because we would actually say we're a very brand safe environment. We have lots and lots of positive content and we don't really touch on a lot of the news stories. If we do touch on kind of some of the more sort of darker sides of society and people's behaviours, it's usually in a way that it's reporting on it and it's actually showing what the solution is. So if you've been affected by it, we'll try and direct people in the right places and expose stuff and show how we can kind of make things better. But it's a really interesting thing. We have to acknowledge that it happens, but try and find the best way forward for that. But what I'm sometimes finding, and I completely understand your point on people safety, but if we go back to what originally brand safety was, it was obviously trying to keep brands out of those really toxic, abusive, hate-filled environments. And what we're sometimes seeing at Hearst is that the AI and the machine learning, it's a bit of a blunt tool. And take the war on Ukraine at the moment. We've had clients, as soon as kind of the war started, come to us, relatively safe, positive brand environment, and to all the other publishers and go, stop my spend. Like, we basically need to reassess and understand kind of which environments we do and don't want to be in because of the war. Now, I completely understand that. I think that's probably a sensible thing to do. But effectively, when you're using some of the AI technology, what it's actually doing is not picking up on the full context. So there's lots of advertisers that are pulling back, and it's in areas that are potentially safe for them already because their sort of keyword list is so broad. We had it once with a luxury beauty client, and we did a whole analysis of all the keywords that effectively they didn't want to be by, obviously without the context. And it was like, you can advertise on 5% of our websites. And it's like, well, actually, we've got great content, we've got great positive environments. So, we're thinking, like, we spotted things like, war on waste. That's a sustainability story. But if you're picking out war and it's to do with Ukraine, well, that would just be blanket kind of no-no. So there's a bit more sophistication that I think needs to come through. But obviously in the sense of kind of the abuse side of things, obviously we write about that, we get our journalists on it. And we do it often from a very female perspective because it does obviously affect us quite a lot, and we've got a lot of female brands, so it's obviously important for us to highlight, but also try and make sure that there's change in place and we can kind of be a force for good as well in improving those things.
The only point I was going to make, I don't disagree with anything anybody said. I think, and I don't want to sound like a wanker saying this, but
always a good way to lead it.
And everyone's going, he's going to sound like a wanker. We are trying to come up with an operational solution to what is a fundamentally philosophical question.
And a human problem.
And a human problem. The philosophical question is it better that people can freely communicate with each other across time zones, all the things that kind of social media enables you to do, which on the face of it, you'd look at it 50 years ago and you think that sounds great. But the philosophical question is that better or worse for humanity? And right now, there's a hell of a lot of evidence that suggests that it isn't. And I'm not against free speech, I'm not against free expression, I'm not against, being able to talk to your granny across, who lives in Australia and all that. I'm not against any of that. But there is a huge, huge amount of evidence which seems to be growing, despite the efforts of Facebook, despite the efforts of one or two politicians whom you might have some faith in, despite the efforts of everybody on this panel, everybody out here, that it's getting worse rather than better. So I'm not trying to sound like a philosopher, i.e. wanker, but or pseudo-philosopher, but that is the critical question. Can you come up with an operational solution to what is effectively a philosophical dilemma? And I just don't think we're anywhere close to coming up with what the answer is. And I certainly haven't got it.
I'm just aware of the time, but leading on, I guess, to the piece around free speech, and we haven't touched on Elon Musk. So someone who's had a very well-publicised viewpoint on where he says is now taking over one of those platforms. Anyone have a view? I'm sure everyone has a view, but does anyone want to take that?
Does anyone believe that's why he's bought it, for freedom of free speech? Does anybody in the audience think that's actually why he's bought Twitter? Yeah. Why do you think that?
Do you want to elaborate on that? You said yes, I couldn't see.
I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Sorry, yeah. That sounded really confrontational, but I'm just mystified.
It's that wanker thing.
I mean, I think inherently the point of his vision with validating human interaction is a part of demonstrating that he wants real humans to be on this platform speaking about what they feel and think and enabling a space for critical speech.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone have a different view they might want to put to that?
I don't have a different view. I think Elon has the ability to do things that make him feel good, which none of the rest of us can. But I believe that people are mean and they're nasty, and that's a reality of the world that we live in, and also the perspectives that we have over here for a family who've lost their kids through bombing in the East could be slightly different. And his issue, which I agree with, is who is the censor. I definitely don't think Zuckerberg's the right censor. I don't think Jack Dorsey was the right censor. I hate Donald Trump. I don't want to hear him. He's done the worst things ever. I mean, it was awful. But you can't. I don't think it's a really difficult question to decide who it becomes a censor.
Okay.
That's the thing.
I'm going to move on because, again, just very aware of time. I think that was a really great first round, and I believe we go in 1-0 on the agency side. So
We're trying to count the clock down.
Can we turn it around?
don't worry. I've got this, Danny, don't worry.
Picture of Gem as a child.
So what we're going to do here, just to speed this round up, we've got two pictures. There's a picture round again, columnists of ours that have given us a picture from quite a long time ago, and you've got one each, you've got to guess. Part of what we're going to do here after we've done the guessing is just very quickly, I want to just go along the line and each of the panellists just to either give... to tell a story in terms of why they got into the industry, someone who inspires them, could be someone that still inspires them today or something. So let's get to the pictures and then very quickly we'll go down the line and do that. So going to come to agency first of all. Here we have this picture. So my question to you is, when did Rogie and Rennie... Rogie and Rennie.
Rogie Rennie.
Is that
I've made up a new gangster name. And that was on purpose, of course it was.
Well, Rogie's Nick Manning.
Rennie.
What was the question?
So who of our columnists is in this picture?
Well, Nick Manning's with Colin Gottlieb.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Do I get bonus points for Colin?
No.
Or Rogie?
So taken at the office. No, you don't. I'm doing the points here,
Right,
okay?
sorry.
So 2-0.
Sorry to not conferred.
Taken at the offices of Simons, Palmer, Denton, Clemens and Johnson in summer of 1990, just prior to their resignation from CIA and the launch of MGM. It is indeed Nick Manning and his partner Colin Gottlieb. So this is what Nick said. I've always said I work in advertising, not media, and subtle but important distinction. And better advertising is even rarer today and even more needed. So just before we get on to the next one, I'm going to get your picture up as well. So one of the people in this picture is one of our columnists.
Hold your comments.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean, oh yeah?
Looks like he was taken in 1834.
No, it's obvious. Once you know, it's obvious, I think.
Seeing the Waltons.
Is his eyes again?
No, this is the...
Sorry.
Can you actually see?
Just playing with them.
Do you want to help in the audience at all?
It's the same one I keep on guessing, but I'm not going to say it again.
Is it Jan?
Yeah,
Jan,
I keep on
middle.
guessing Jan, so I'm going to go with that.
Oh, well done. We've got some
Jan. This is Jan as a young account manager at Fletcher Shelton Delaney, which was in the process of doing a management buyout, and she had to organise the launch event of the newly named Burkitt, Weinreich, Bryant, Clients and Company, including this shoot for the board of PR photos. It happened on her 26th birthday, and right at the end, they pulled her into the shot to have a record. Jan said, I went on to be the first woman on that same board a few years later, just after my 30th birthday. I also married Hugh Burkitt when I was 32. I had my hands on his shoulders. Little did I know what lay ahead. Shame that Jan isn't here. We could get more out. But so I know obviously just push for time. I'm going to just take you down, starting from here.
Ooh, okay.
The piece that we talked around in terms of, something that got, why did you get into the industry, or someone or something that inspired you, whatever you choose.
Okay, well, it's a good thing that we've moved on at least somewhat on a D&I perspective from that. So well done for Jan.
And the thing is, she only got pulled in because she organised it. She wasn't even meant to be in that picture.
Oh wow. So I got into the industry straight out of school, and I've written on this so I can tell it out loud and be proud about it, by going to a job centre in Wardour Street and picking up a card for an administration assistant job at a local newspaper sales house. That local newspapers existed in those days, because it's quite a long time ago. And a couple of years later, and I was still working at one of those companies, I got a call from a chap that had worked there before, who'd gone over to work at Saatchi & Saatchi, and gave me my first job in an advertising agency at the tender age of 18 at Saatchi & Saatchi in Charlotte Street. And so that guy was called Roy Jeans, and I thank him forever. Even though he's a bit of an arse, but I am very, very grateful to him. And there was another lady called Jean Franks, who actually gave me the first job as the admin assistant. So, she gets more thanks from me, and everyone should be more Jean, because she decided not to worry about kind of. I had plenty of qualifications, but didn't worry about employing someone from a very working class background who was very young, but spotted obvious talent in that situation, as has become apparent, and she was very insightful. So she inspires me every day as well. I think in the current, sorry to take too long, but in the current version, I think Karen Blackett got a mention, and should always get a mention in these situations, and a few of us have worked for and with Karen. I also think that Josh Krzyzewski deserves a bit of a mention as well in this. He inspires me, and he's now the global COO, I think, of Essence Mediacom.
Messence?
Yeah, Messence, that we're not allowed to call it. And the EMEA CEO or something. Anyway, but a few of us work for him. And it's a pretty hard-nosed business, and there are some male and female pretty hard-ass people in Mediacom who do see any sort of vulnerability as a major weakness, frankly. And he has ignored that and talks a lot about mental health and talks a lot about his own challenges, and therefore leads from the front on that, and it really encourages everyone in that business to be able to bring themselves to work, I think, their whole selves to work. So I think he deserves a call out. It's quite inspirational as well.
So I got into the industry through my older brother. He basically chose media studies at A-level and kind of would come home and talk about all these stories about how pretty much he just watched films the whole time in his lessons. And I was like, hang on a minute, this isn't a proper subject, but I want to do that too. So I signed up for it. Did media studies at A-level and loved the advertising part of it. So there was like a module that we did on advertising. Then I went through to university, actually did advertising and marketing communication. And it was linked to Mediacom. So Mediacom actually helped set the syllabus at that time. So my final year project and presentation, where in typical university style, you sort of had to get in teams and pretend you were an advertising agency and a media agency and basically pitch. It was actually a live pitch, it was a live brief, and it was one of Mediacom's clients. So we pitched to our tutors, to Mediacom staff who actually worked on the account, and to clients. So they shipped the Mars client down to Bournemouth, and we presented to them. And I was headhunted from that, really. They sort of used that as a bit of a fertile ground to pluck people out and go, we want the first pick of the people coming into the industry and take them into Mediacom. And I would probably say someone who's inspired me as a leader was actually Steve Allen. So he was the CEO when I started at Mediacom.
Mr. Steve.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He was like one of those people where everyone was, making a contribution in the agency. And, I was a young grad in there and hadn't contributed to half of the things by the time I'd arrived. But he would still come around with the award wins and literally stop at everyone's desk, show you the actual award, tell you what it was won for, and kind of say congratulations to the small part that you might have played by even just being part of the culture of the agency. So I think I sort of learned from that this inclusive, everyone plays a part was really important.
Then show you a picture of his villa in Miami.
Jim?
Really simple. I was at college with Kelly Williams, who now runs ITV. He was a year ahead of me. He started at Thames TV, bumped into him in London, So I'm looking for a job, and he goes, "Oh, come work at Thames TV. It's like college, but with expenses." So, well, I mean, he's not going to, that was amazing. So that's how I got into the industry, and I've had a sort of zigzaggy kind of career all the way through it. The most inspirational person I've worked with is probably a guy called Steve Gladys, who my two teammates will know, just because talking about bringing your true self to work, he definitely does that, and he's unbelievably smart.
Yeah.
True.
Brilliant. Lisa?
You're probably now heading towards the non-media specialists in the room, because I guess I didn't start in media, I started in marketing. So I started as a junior brand manager. I was really made up because my first job was at Nintendo, and built a career in marketing. I think probably, I work with media agencies, creative agencies, PR agencies, but I always kind of felt like the brightest people I interacted with, agency side, were always at the media agency. I think when I was at HSBC, I was sort of in charge of all our digital advertising, so creative and media. Worked with Dave Walsh at Mindshare. Really bright guy. He kind of brought more sense to advertising than anyone else I met. So when I was approached by a headhunter to go work as a managing partner at MEC, I kind of thought, yep, I'm going to do that. And then went from there to then specialise in media for Vodafone. But I think it's the strategists in media agencies that I just always feel inspired by. And I think it's that mixture of kind of creativity and science that you get in media, which sort of, it sort of plays your left and right brain. That's kind of what keeps me going in this industry.
Okay.
Mel Gibson.
I think we all agree with that as well.
I watched
too.
What Women Want. That was it. A career in advertising records, to be honest.
Excellent.
The TV buying floors of Mindshare wasn't what I quite had in mind. But that was my first job. I've been a TV buyer. Simon Willis employed me at Mindshare. I sort of followed him around to Wavemaker, then I went to Dentsu. Ended up at Sky. And look, we live in our own bubble. Often we're told in the advertising bubble, but it's a lovely bubble to be in. So I love it.
Awesome. I was a composer, and I got into Cambridge to study music. And we were living in, my family's from Lincolnshire, we were living in Cape Town at the time, so I had 8 months in Cape Town to do bugger all until the academic year started. And so I went to the University of Cape Town, which is sea and surf, and it's just really, really wonderful. And my accent obviously got stronger. And I studied marketing and finance at the same time. And after that, I went to Ogilvy and Mather's School, which is an amazing school run by just really good old world advertising people who were very rough and very, very, very hard. And so I got a job. So I got a really, really great job at an agency. And I did that. I did that Hollywood thing. I went to work in a fantastic. Nobody else did, but I wore a suit. I was like GQ Man of the Year kind of events. I loved that thing. It was awesome. And then the agency I worked for lost their client, which was 60% of their revenue, and I was last in, first out. And they actually phoned me. One of the other clients phoned me, and they said, "Listen, your agency is getting fired tomorrow, but we really like you. Do you want to join us?" So it's like in a split 2 seconds, I'd lost my job, and I'd been offered a job. So it was quite an easy choice. It was like, okay, thank you. And then I got to the client side, and I must say that I dabbled back in agencies several times, 3 times, 2 to fantastic agencies, 1 to an awful agency, which actually taught me quite a lot. But I've always had this romance with the agencies, and like you, it is those, particularly 10 years ago, the heavyweight strategists in the media agencies, some of them are now Facebook people. I really always inspired by that. But what I enjoyed about being where I am now and doing what I am now is that whole thing of that responsibility and that accountability. Because it's really great when I was in an agency to go, I'd love you to do this, it's really great, and thank you, next one. But to have that accountability all the way to the end and actually be responsible for having fucked up, if that's what happened. Yeah. So I find it very, very inspiring. And my absolute star is a woman called Dawn Rowlands. She's in Dentsu, and she is just one of the most inspiring and passionate media leaders. If ever I find myself faltering, I go back to Dawn.
Brilliant. Well, look, we did have a third round, but I'm going to leave it there because we've run out of time. I think the score ended up about 2-1 to 2-8. 2-all then.
We'll give you 2.
I think we all know the real winners, though, are you guys here. Please put your hands together for the panel. And that brings an end to the Future of Brands. It's been a fantastic 2 days. There's an incredible amount of work that goes into these events. I kind of really always want to give my team a shout out. I don't know if they're all in here right now, but they're absolutely awesome. You guys rock. And please put your hands together for those guys because this has been brilliant.